All right, my friends, it is Friday, February 14th, 2025, and I have seven big stories for you today. So here we go. We'll start with this with Zelensky. So Zelensky says, I don't see a concrete U.S. plan to end the war. Okay, they're still in formulating things, and they're floating trial balloons, and some of the trial balloons sound absolutely terrible to my mind, as far as like no NATO, or why would you even say that? Okay, key statements from the Ukrainian president. Quote, it will be very difficult, just very difficult. I understand what might be discussed, things that belong to us. It will be hard, but who said we won't overcome difficulties? And the US and Trump are not ready to discuss NATO membership for Ukraine. They believe Kyiv cannot join the alliance. I, I think they shouldn't even be discussing that if they're trying to get leverage, but okay, that's assuming that they're trying to get leverage. If we are not NATO, Ukraine must have an army of 1.5 million soldiers with modern weaponry. Now, that's the kind of thing that I think Trump's not factoring in here yet. Is really you have to build that in order to sustain it, or you have to have peacekeepers of 200 or 400, maybe 500,000. And I don't think he's factoring that in. Ukraine needs a serious military presence, not just a peacekeeping mission, like serious peacekeepers that are actively there as a real threat to Russia trying to do this again. A peacekeeping force made up of solely Ukrainians could be an option, but weaponry remains an issue. Ukraine will never recognize occupied territories as Russian, and they're fine to concede that. Okay, well, we can do this and say, Russia, you're keeping that, and Ukraine, you're not recognizing it, but we're okay with that. I don't think that's really a great thing, but that's kind of the direction that they seem to be going. It's very disappointing to watch. The USA can stop any evil, says President Zelensky. He hopes that the states are on our side because Russia attacked and occupied Ukraine. And that is what happened. Russia did occupy. Now, I was thinking about this. I was driving home, and I just tend to be thinking about things like this when I'm driving home. And I was listening to an audiobook that was talking about what the Nazis were doing. There will not be a Nuremberg. The direction that we're going, there will not be justice for Ukraine if we have an artificial ceasefire peace deal that is going to preempt actually bringing anyone to justice. So all the people that have been unjustly violated in Ukraine will unfortunately have no justice if we keep going down the path we're going.
United
Okay,
States is
here's
not in the
Zelensky.
middle. I think that United States is in the top. Yes, and they can stop any evil. And they, in this case, they have to be on the side of us because they attacked us and occupied us. So we are right, and they are not. No compromises in this, not between on our side. I think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, that is a thing. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. Okay, next big story. Head of the Ukrainian presidential, well, this is still part of the Munich story here. Head of the Ukrainian presidential office, Andrei Yermak, met with U.S. Special Representative Kellogg to discuss continued support for Ukraine. So that's good that they're getting together. They addressed European and global security, preparations for high-level meetings, and Kellogg's upcoming visit to Ukraine. Yermak emphasized that helping Ukraine now is much cheaper than dealing with a stronger Russia in the future. I don't know how much of that message is going to get through, but let's see. The U.S. will continue to support Ukraine, Zelensky says, after meeting with American senators. And so it looks like, yes, the United States is going to continue to support, but we don't know what that looks like exactly. Okay, at that same Munich meeting, Vance is, this is the headline, is that Vance turns on European allies in blistering speech that downplays threats from Russia and China. I'm just going to show you a couple lines here in this article. He zeroed in on a decision by Romania's constitutional court to cancel out the country's presidential election last year, after its intelligence service uncovered a campaign coordinated by a state actor to help elect Gerdes, ultranationalist, a vision virtually unknown before the election, who unexpectedly won the first round vote. And then, so focusing on that, Vance said this, quote, when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we need to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard, Vance says. Consider the side that in the fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. Like, this is what he's focusing on, and he's kind of making them sound like the Soviets, and it's really weird. Notably, Vance did not criticize countries like Russia and Belarus, which have been ruled by the same leaders for decades and allowed only stage-managed elections. Like, why would you look at this part but not that part? Because that part is so much worse than this part. And what is actually happening, if you're informed, in Romania was they did find that this wasn't actually working, like that there was this nefarious use, and they were subverting the law in how the elections went. The vice president said that he understands the argument that Romania canceled its election, which had been rescheduled for May because, quote, Russian disinformation had infected the electoral process, but he said that European leaders need to get some perspective. Quote, if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. Oh, my head hurts just reading this. Like, this is so focused on the wrong thing. It's like saying, Hitler was a vegetarian. It's true, Hitler was a vegetarian, but that's hardly the story. That's not the headline. And he's focused on the wrong thing. Okay, Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio, Trump says Trump seeks to complete and end the war, end the Ukraine war, not a temporary pause. Okay, I like the sound of that, depending on how it actually ends. I mean, that he understands that. The Trump administration aims to secure lasting peace in Ukraine through a step-by-step process, starting with a ceasefire. I don't like the sound of that, because starting with a ceasefire gives Russia time to catch its breath. And he's saying that in a radio interview. So I just don't know how that's going to play out. I mean, yeah, I just don't know. Okay, so Nick Schifrin, now he is the foreign affairs and defense correspondent at PBS NewsHour. He's saying, breaking, Secretary of Defense walks back his statement yesterday that a negotiated settlement is not likely to end with Ukraine in NATO. These negotiations are led by Donald Trump. Everything is on the table. That's what Hegseth was, kind of walking back a little bit. But Trump himself was saying, I just don't see that they're going to be in NATO. So I don't know how much value that is. Okay, Michael McFaul is actually in Munich, and he said here at Munich Conference 2025, so many people are discussing Trump's peace plan as Munich 2.0. I hope they're wrong. Wow. And you can go back to my video yesterday where I was explaining what happened at Munich back in 1938, and that was the impetus before the Peace in Our Times statement by Chamberlain, and that's very sad to see. Keir Starmer from Britain is, and by the way, I'm sorry, I said England yesterday rather than Britain. I do that sometimes. I try to say it right, but it's just, it's, as an American, I say it wrong sometimes. I apologize to my British friends. This morning, I spoke to President Zelensky and reaffirmed that there can be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine. Ukraine has our concrete support for as long as it's needed, and I think that the message from Europe has to be a very clear, united, overwhelmingly supporting statement like this. Like, this is Jessica Berlin saying the headlines out of Munich this weekend need to be about European action, and the stress on the word action, not American appeasement. Trump and Putin will only respond to strength. Europe needs to show it, announce serious new military aid, major new sanctions, real enforcement of existing ones, and make Russia pay. I don't think that's what we're going to see when it's all said and done, but that is what is necessary. She's right. Gary Kasparov says, the question I'm putting to officials here in Munich and at the UN is there anything that you would fight for? That's a good question. Is there anything that you would actually fight for? The answers are depressing, and the reality is worse. A world of Chamberlains. He's right. I mean, that is kind of where we are. Now, let's switch gears to the second big story. This is really, really interesting. So, Anton Gerashenko posted this. Is Putin failing in relations with India? India? Why are we talking about India? What's going on there? Well, it's really interesting. Now, remember, Trump is focused on China. The American government is, like the military, is focused on what could possibly break out with China. So India is China's primary rival, not just in the region, but in population and just like they don't like each other. Okay, India's Prime Minister Modi has arrived in the United States and met with President Trump. The results of the talks are close to sensational. By it's him saying this. This isn't me. I'm not making stuff up. I don't cherry pick. I know you're probably thinking, well, he's just cherry picking things to make Trump look good. I'm not trying to make Trump look good. I don't care about that. I care about Ukraine here, and I'm trying to show you what's relevant to Ukraine. Okay, by 2030, the U.S. and India plan to more than double the total bilateral trade to $500 billion, Modi and Trump said in a joint statement. The leaders agreed to work together to build U.S. nuclear reactors in India. Cooperation will be in artificial intelligence and semiconductors, as well as building strong supply chains for strategic materials. The semiconductors makes me a little nervous about maybe ditching Taiwan and letting China do something there, but okay. India is ready to reduce tariffs on U.S. goods. They had prohibitive tariffs about things like, so I had a friend, Samir Patel, when I was in my MBA program, and I asked him when he was leaving, like I wouldn't have gotten through finance without Samir helping, like tutoring me along. So thank you, Samir. I appreciate that. And Samir, when he was about to leave back for India, I said, "So are you bringing your car back?" He said, "No, no, no. Like there would be a 200 or 300. I don't remember what it was, but something like a 300% tariff on bringing in the car to India, and that's protectionist tariff, like to protect Tata Motors, which is their primary brand in India." And so, you have a $20,000 car and it's going to cost you $60,000 to bring it in. It's not worth it. Okay, at any rate, I'm digressing here. So India is ready to reduce tariffs on U.S. goods. The two sides agreed to increase U.S. oil and gas exports and boost U.S. arms sales to India. That's going to be big as well. In addition to purchases of American weapons, joint production of American Javelin anti-tank missile systems and Stryker armored personnel carriers will be organized on Indian territory. India is China's main rival. India sees Russia's growing dependence on China, and this is a deterrent for India to do more business with them. So, like, India is soaking up all the oil that it can from Russia while it's cheap. And I talked about that the other day. And they're doing that, and that's bad. But they don't trust what's going on in their own neighborhood. The U.S., unlike Russia, can offer India not only oil, but also the latest technologies, quality weapons, investment resources. So India has already gotten what it needs from Russia, which is oil. India does not want to go along with Russia's agenda of promoting competition against the West. Like, they've tried to be neutral, but they really don't want to get in bed with the Russians. With India shifting its focus, the chances of Russia playing a serious role in Asia are greatly diminished. So this is actually kind of a coup that India is coming over to this side of the equation. Russia is now increasingly dependent on China. Instead of a geopolitical pole, Russia is gradually becoming a satellite and vassal of China. I think that's a very fair analysis. Now, with that, Ryan Macbeth put this out today, and I thought this was interesting and worth watching.
So President Trump met with Indian Prime Minister Modi, and they talked about something that's near and dear to my heart.
Starting this year, we'll be increasing military sales to India by many billions of dollars. We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighters.
Yeah, I did the same thing. What? So India is purchasing major military weaponry, and their economies between the United States and India may very well be coming closer. Okay, next big story. Moldova summoned the Russian ambassador, laid it on the table in front of him, the debris of Russian drones that attacked Moldovan territory yesterday. I just want you to look at this, like the Russian ambassador coming in. He's being summoned, and he comes into the office and sees that. Uh-oh. This is him looking at that. Yep. Yeah, you got some explaining to do. And now, what will they do with it? That's really the question. And this has been the question for 3 freaking years. What are European powers going to do when Russia crosses a line? And if they don't do anything, we get more of the same. Okay, Russian oil companies, next big story, are preparing to start forced production cuts as they are unable to sell millions of barrels of oil. Reuters reports, citing 3 oil executives, and more than 10 traders, refining executives, and port agents. Volumes from Russia's western ports of Primorsk and Ust-Luga and Novorossiysk in January were down 17% from a year earlier, and the cost to transport a cargo from Russia's Pacific port of Kazmino to China up fivefold in January. Reuters calculations based on traders' data showed. As a result, Russian firms and traders have stored, listen to this, they're storing 17 million barrels aboard ships since January 10th. Well, what happened in January 10th? It was the last couple of weeks of the Biden administration, and they put those sanctions in place. So again, Biden gets credit. It's a little late, but Biden still gets credit for that. Up from zero at the start of the year, Goldman Sachs estimates. The figure could rise to 50 million barrels in the first half of 2025. Just kind of nowhere to go. Why? There's no oil depots, or there's fewer of them than there were before to store this. So there's nowhere to store this oil. There are almost no large storage facilities in Russia, and those that do exist were hit in January. It is also difficult to refine the excess oil at refineries. Drone attacks have knocked out around 10% of Russian refining capacity. Drones also attacked Russia's limited oil storage, as well as pipelines, pumping stations, disrupting flows to export ports. There was a drone attack this morning. I just didn't cover it because I was covering the Chernobyl. I don't know why. Nobody was watching it. It was like one of the lower videos, the Chernobyl. Okay, so Russia hits Chernobyl, the nuclear power plant, with a drone. And I would think that would be wildly interesting to people. It was to me. I was like, what? What's happening here? And okay, so I didn't cover the drone attacks elsewhere that Ukraine did because that was primary. Okay, today Russia produces 8.9 million barrels per day, fulfilling the OPEC Plus production cut deal compared to the 2019 record of 11.25 million barrels per day. Oil production is down 20%. So it's having an effect. Okay, next big story. Germany should recognize Russia's war against Ukraine as an emergency for its own security, says Chancellor Scholz. Okay, well, again, remember, his election is about a week away, and I'm going to be talking to a German professor about everything Germany and to try to get some sense about this very shortly. Chancellor Scholz said he agreed with President Trump that the war in Ukraine should end as soon as possible, but he noted that the defeat of Ukraine will lead not to peace, but to the opposite. That's right. That's correct. So he says the Bundestag should, as soon as possible, pass a resolution on the classification of the war in Ukraine and its serious consequences for the security of Germany and Europe as an emergency within the meaning of Article 115, Clause 2 of the Constitution. So what does that mean? So I was trying to find out. I think I know what it is. I think what it means is that you can spend more on this above and beyond the normal budget because this is an emergency, a declared emergency that's something beyond our budget. Now, when I looked at the German Constitution, here's Article 115, but there's Article 115A, B, C, D, E, all the way to Article 115I. And when I looked at Clause 2s, the Clause 2 of each of these, it kind of looked like that's what it was saying. So I'm not an expert in German constitutional law, but I think that's what's going on. Okay, next. Ukraine submits revised partnership memorandum to the U.S., a decision expected by the evening. So we're talking about the rare earth minerals, that sort of thing. During a telephone conversation on Wednesday, President Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump agreed that Ukraine would finalize the draft memorandum of a partnership and hand it over to the Americans. Ukraine handed over the document, and the American side asked for time until 5 p.m. to work with it, the Ukraine delegation said. So they revised some of the whatever was written out in the deal. They revised a little bit about it. I hope they revised it and they said you can have any of the rare earth minerals in the currently occupied territory. That's what they need to be doing. Details of the changes in the document have not been disclosed, but that would be quite a coup. That is what I was hoping for when this actually started to break, and that's why I was very optimistic the other day, and then became very pessimistic after hearing what Donald Trump was saying. Not pessimistic. That's the wrong word. Just like depressed that he's actually saying that. Now, Trump also talks about all kinds of things all over the map, so I don't know what will happen, but it just looks like he was taking things that he shouldn't be taking off the table. That was my read. Okay, the Trump-Putin Non-Aggression Pact of 2025 will contain a secret clause that assigns Poland to Russian sphere in exchange for the U.S. keeping Alaska, says Darth Putin, the parody site. It kind of feels like something like that, doesn't it? Okay, so I, in frustration, was writing my senators. If you just Google how to contact your senators, you'll see contacting U.S. senators as the first thing that'll pop up. It'll say contacting U.S. senators, ussenate.gov. And then here's a sample letter that I wrote to my senators that maybe will be helpful to you. And so I'll just quickly read that for you. Look, what you say is not nearly as important that you said something. You can say a one line, please support Ukraine and don't support Russia, and tell Trump to do the same, or something like that, and that's perfectly fine. I wrote, Dear Senator so-and-so. Now, both of my senators are Republicans, and so I was also adding, look, I voted for you in the past a couple of times. Please, I want to be able to vote for you in the future. And so they'll hear that kind of thing as well. And if that's true, then add that. My name is my name. I live at my address. I am writing to ask you to push back against President Trump's abandonment of Ukraine. Ukraine is a friend of the U.S. Russia has repeatedly demonstrated that it's not. I'm watching with astonishment as President Trump is giving in to a strategic rival. We cannot allow Russia to get a better deal than Ukraine, making the U.S. look weak and potentially come back to attack another European neighbor, potentially leading to a broader war. Please assure me that you will use your influence to tell President Trump that he must not look weak. I think this is the right path. Like, Trump doesn't want to look weak. And if he gets the message from a lot of people that he's looking weak, I mean, that's not what he wants. Please use your influence to tell President Trump that he must not look weak by giving Putin what he wants. He appears to be the new Chamberlain. I'm afraid that the phrase, the war must end, will be our 21st century version of peace in our time. Thank you for supporting Ukraine. I'm looking forward to hearing what you plan to do in this regard, and then my name. So that's a sample, and I'll leave this here in the screen so that you can just freeze the screen if you want to use an equivalent, and hopefully that'll be helpful. All right, that's all that I have for you, my friends. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you more than anything else for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.